Je anilo premadano karma kacho Je anilo premadano Aruna.
Yeah, that's right. This was maybe 1998 or 9 something. And yeah, so he called me to do kirtan. I was in Seattle at that time in graduate school and working in the university. So, I went and I came and, anything you need, just let me know. He said, you just sit here in my office, just plant yourself there all day long, just chant. That's all I want you to do. Just do kirtan. That's what I did all day. That's all he wanted. He just wanted to feel that support, or just wanted to create a spiritual environment that, that's all he had. That's all he asked me to do. He was at that time always thinking of Vrindavan and always thinking of the holy names, and he was deeply absorbed in Krishna consciousness. So I had that good opportunity. Yeah, and then I had that experience many times actually, even before then. Sometimes he would just call me into the room and I wouldn't doing anything, just chanting. He just wanted somebody there. So, yeah, I mean, I haven't mentioned it yet because I've been looking at the history, but in terms of his personal qualifications and his primary characteristic in my mind is that he was the personification of Guru Nishtha. In my mind, he was the personification of the ideal disciple. We have Sevya Bhagavan and we have Sevak Bhagavan. And to me, Srila Prabhupada is of course Sevak Bhagavan, but he's the Sevak of the Sevak Bhagavan, ideal Sevaka. And I think many people, it's a fact, many people have said this about him. The way that he served Prabhupada was so exemplary from the very beginning. And he just personified this principle of absolute faith and dedication to the spiritual master. We know that literally the last verse of Shvetashvatara Upanishad is Yasya Deve Parabhaktir Yatha Deve Tatha Gurau Tasyaiti Katitha Hirtaha Prakashante Mahatmanaha. That all the imports of the Vedic literatures are automatically revealed to somebody who has equal faith in Krishna and in Guru. And there's nobody who really embodied that, as far as I know, more than Tamal Krishna Maharaj. Because he just somehow or other, by his very nature, he just had that. It seems from birth, because from the very moment that he joined, he just knew what to do. And he just fit right into his slot. And he was surrendered completely, and his faith was absolute, and he made a decision, and that was it. And he just totally surrendered to Srila Prabhupada. But more than the fact that he surrendered is that he knew how to do that in ways that we all, take years to figure out. The best way to learn this about him, or to observe this about him, I think in 2023, is to read his Servant of the Servant, which was first published in the 1980s. That was his first book, actually. But it's very well written, and the information that he chose to write is also very important. And I think one of the most striking things about that book is that he is from time to time throughout the book quoting from letters that Prabhupada gave him, letters of instruction. But the really salient thing that teaches you who is Tamal Krishna Goswami is that the ways that he understood those letters and interpreted what Prabhupada's instructions were and intuited what the lesson to be learned was, that is entirely his own. That's coming from him, from within his heart. And it speaks so much about the character of his faith and the depth of his faith and dedication. And that very nicely illustrates, I think, why it is that he was such an ideal disciple. But many, many, many God brothers have said this. And it was also very clear at the very end. First of all, he went there to be Prabhupada's secretary in the first place. Not everybody did that, but he did, because he knew. And but all along, even in 1969, in London, there's that famous photograph. He's holding the umbrella over Prabhupada. And, just these little things. And Prabhupada's nose was running, he would take his own dhoti and wipe Prabhupada's nose. This is he had this spirit of Shishya Bhava by his very nature, even though he was born in Manhattan, New York. So, just really, really an amazing, incomparable personality that I feel was, sent along with Prabhupada from the spiritual world. And when Prabhupada left, after some time, he obviously had some further mission for Tamal Krishna Maharaj that none of his other followers could do. So he went back. And the world is so much poorer for it, but we can try to remember his instructions and his legacy and his example, especially. That was really the thing, is his example. I find that when I am preaching, the things that come to me to speak are not necessarily directly from what I've studied in Prabhupada's books, but they're lessons that he gave 30 years before. Because he was so thoughtful that he was always thinking like that. He was looking not at the the direct result in 2 weeks, but what's going to be the result of this statement in 30 years. And so, that's he was such a person that although he was not hesitant to give instructions or to give orders or to command people to do things and even demand surrender, he wasn't hesitant to accept an authority position, which is sometimes missed because you need that often enough. But the instructions that he gave were sometimes not even didactic. You didn't even know that you were being trained up. It's just the way that he dealt with you was in such a way that you got a lesson when you spiritually matured after some years, then appreciated why he did like that, why he did like that. He was just such an incredibly insightful, meticulous, intelligent, a genius level person in planning how to spread Krishna consciousness, that he was always effective in doing so. We've already spoken about his empathy, and empathy is a quality that Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 6, text 32, is necessary and characterizes the best of the yogis. He had that. He definitely had that. But he had this faith, he had the intelligence, the determination, the empathy, and the humility in his own way. I told this to a god brother, and he just looked at me incredulously. Tamal Krishna Goswami, humble? As I said, it was hard to see sometimes, but he really, really had a very deep humility. Very, very deep humility. Were it not so, he would not have been able to take so much, not only from Prabhupada, but from even his own god brothers, and just carry on, all the way up until the end. He never wavered. So that in my mind, this Guru Nishtha and the importance of Guru Nishtha is also, this is one of his central points in preaching. He would always mention this. It was very, very, he even named one of his disciples Guru Nishtha. Because, that's what it comes down to. At the end of the day, that's what it's all about. And he had that realization for sure. And he was constantly emphasizing that need for sure. That was him. Well, my position was also, I was always around and always working under him and had my own interactions with him, but not in a managerial level. So I wouldn't really be able to say much about that, but I can see that, certain things that he did, like, strategic decisions that he made. I mentioned already this whole Dallas plan. I watched that happen. And, it's that I think is pretty clear that, he was he was always meditating on how better to represent Prabhupada, and to a meticulous degree. He was a very meticulous person. He could come into an air-conditioned room and he would tell you whether it was 78 degrees or 80 degrees. He was that sharp, perceptive. He would tell the cooks how much of each spice they put in and, how much it should be. Just by tasting, he could know. And, in this way, he was very, very meticulous in the ways that he planned things and the ways that he executed things. Very, very, very meticulous. Micromanager also. He would just get into a level of detail if he thought it was important. If he didn't think it was important, he wouldn't do so. But that's how he was. Yeah, you could give him anything. The Chinese, anything. And he would excel. Suddenly he's an academic. It's tremendous. You can read his book, Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti. It's the last book he wrote. It wasn't finished. And, he probably would have finished it in a different way. But especially the first few chapters, very, very piercing insight, very meticulous, careful scholarship. He was really good. And the amazing thing about him was that his books are also written like this, but he did not really follow outlines that much. He just had it all organized in his mind, and he would dictate. I saw him do this. I helped him with it. He would just dictate his papers, and they would come out perfectly organized. Because he had that so much acumen that it was like no problem for him to do that. It was just natural. Super genius personality. Actually, Narayan Maharaj, this is how he became associated with Narayan Maharaj, because at some point one of Prabhupada's sons actually got the idea that all of ISKCON's assets he should inherit them because he was the son. And so there was some court case, and naturally this was the kind of thing that Tamal Krishna Goswami would gravitate towards because he was like a watchdog for ISKCON. Dogs sometimes in India, they're not very nicely respected, but they have good qualities. Very faithful, very, very faithful. And he was like that. So he naturally took it upon himself that, I have to take care of this. I'm Prabhupada's disciple, and it's his whole institution is being threatened. Something has to happen. So they approached Narayan Maharaj of the Gaudiya Math to help and to do with that legal case for, I don't know exactly how he was involved, but he was. And so at some point, Tamal Krishna Goswami and Narayan Maharaj together would have to go to the court in Mumbai, downtown. So Maharaj came to Mumbai, he was staying there. And every day before they left to go to the courthouse and slag it out with the legal things, Tamal Krishna Goswami would be very ardently praying in front of Sitaram. Narayan Maharaj, being Narayan Maharaj, he noticed this, and it just really struck him that this is not really so much characteristic of the stereotypical Gaudiya Vaishnava Ishta Devata. So, he didn't say anything. But every day he's seeing that Tamal Krishna Goswami is really fervently praying, very hard. So he couldn't contain his curiosity anymore. Narayan Maharaj just came one day and asked, we're Radha Krishna Upasakas, and we're very fixed on this thing. And of all people, Narayan Maharaj, I think, is more so than anyone like that. So, it must have really been a curiosity for him. So he asked Tamal Krishna Goswami that, why are you praying like this in front of Sitaram? Tamal Krishna Goswami turned around and looked him in the eyes. And whenever Tamal Krishna Goswami looked you in the eye, it was intense. It was like you could feel it. So that alone would have struck anyone. But then he said, I'm not looking at Sitaram. I'm praying to the weapons of Ram and Lakshman. Narayan Maharaj was completely struck by this. From that point on, he said that he realized that these people are deep. These ISKCON people, they understand the philosophy. And in particular, this Tamal Krishna Goswami, he's really something. Actually, this is another thing that is how Narayan Maharaj came to start associating with ISKCON through TKG. After this incident, when he saw that level of Guru Nishtha and Shraddha, then he said that he learned something about what a disciple has to feel, dedication for his spiritual master. So, yeah, I mean, that's one example. Another thing that comes to mind is that there was one event, I think it may have been the disappearance day of Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada. This is when our Srila Prabhupada was still on the planet. So they invited Prabhupada to come and celebrate in the Gaudiya Math. I think it was in Mayapur. So they all went, and Prabhupada was sitting next to his friend and godbrother, Sridhar Maharaj, and Prabhupada told him, he leaned over and said, he pointed at Tamal Krishna Maharaj and he said, I'm going to ask him to speak. When he speaks, you listen carefully. And so, sure enough, when Tamal Krishna Goswami started speaking, he started to speak on this principle, Guru Nishtha. And Sridhar Maharaj is listening and nodding his head. And after he finished speaking, Prabhupada again turned to him and said, this of all these devotees, he has understood. He really gets it. He knows, It would seem as if the Sridhar Maharaj acquiesced that. So yeah, this was his. These are some of the reasons why I always say that this was Tamal Krishna Goswami's primary characteristic, at least in my mind. It's the most important characteristic in my mind, and the most consequential one also. That because he had this attitude, fundamental basis of Krishna consciousness, because he got that, therefore everything else that he built on top of that adhara, it became very successful. A secondary characteristic of there is one behind Guru Nishtha, Tivra Bhakti, Tivrata. He was just intense, really, really intense. Too intense for most people. Intense. So, yeah, and anybody who came into the room and, upon whom Tamal Krishna Goswami focused his preaching efforts, that person was hopeless. His material life was finished. He wouldn't leave the room. Again, it happened many times. I saw it. On Radha Damodar traveling Sankirtan party, some innocent jiva would be swimming in the ocean of Maya and just happen to swim into the bus, and Tamal Krishna Goswami would just focus on him. He would never go home. He would just stay on the bus. From that point on, he was a part of the shaved up. And this was another reason that people just felt so threatened by him, because, this doesn't happen with us. But it happened with him. He was able to do this. He was just really intense. One incident sticks out in my mind that this was in the Vishnu Jan days. They were preaching in the universities, campuses all over the states. So they would come in, they would set up a little thing, an altar with Radha Damodar, and the devotees would sit down and chant Vishnu Jans, chant sweet bhajans. They would have a book table, prasadam, and Tamal Krishna Goswami would be scanning the crowd, looking for the next person. So, he would talk to people and he would ask them a few questions. What are you doing? What do you think about life? And, if the person said, well, my parents have high expectations of me and I want to succeed in life and I want to go for it. And, he said, okay, yeah, great. Have a seat, take prasadam, be happy. And if somebody would come along and say, I don't know, this is why am I doing all this? There's a hard work and, what is it? I'm just going to grow up and multiply and then the kids have to do the same thing. Where's it going? I go, yeah, you're right. Then he would come sit with me, we'll talk. And then that person would be finished. We'd preach to him. He was again, his empathy. He knows who's the person who has some adhikar and who doesn't have adhikar. Who has some faith, who doesn't have faith. Many, many devotees, particularly, religious people, they would join. Tamal Krishna Goswami told me this. You won't find this printed anywhere, but he told me, at least in those days, this is like the 90s or something. In the United States, half the initiated membership of ISKCON comes from the Roman Catholic background, the other half comes from the Jewish background. He said the Roman Catholics join because it's the right thing to do. The Jews join because it's the smart thing to do. So, he had this kind of, he could just get to the root of the matter. And he would say it in such a way that it was just instantly obvious to anyone. He was expert in this, which is why he was so effective preacher. He could take the most abstruse passage of the Bhagavatam and just bring it, to really pedestrian level and make it absolutely inescapably clear to anyone. And that's why people were compelled to join. You have to understand a little bit about the United States, and but there was one gentleman, Badri Narayan Maharaj, told me this story. There was one scholar actually in the University of Ann Arbor, Michigan, and they had their Sunday feast program. Badri Narayan Maharaj was previously preaching there before he took sannyas as a householder, and so this man was coming around the temple, and once Tamal Krishna Goswami came to give the lecture, he's guest speaker. So this man was in the audience, the professor. The professor was from Texas. If you know anything about the United States, the Texans, they're all like George Bush, if you remember him. And, they're really kind of down home, folksy kind of, informal people, and they have a particular accent that they speak with. But this man was very intelligent and he liked the devotees. So he was listening to the lecture, he's nodding his head, and at the end of the lecture, because he had some relationship with Badrinath Maharaj, he came to Badrinath and he said, "You know what?" He said, "I don't know nothing about y'all's philosophy, but that man can talk a hungry dog out of a pork chop." So, everybody appreciated this about him. When he left this world in 2002, so many scholars wrote so many memories about him. It was published in a booklet even. So many people. He touched so many lives on so many different levels. All kinds of people from all kinds of places. He was always able to penetrate every situation and empathize with every personality and convince them to surrender to Krishna. He was so effective at that. Radha Damodar, he was capable of doing this. That's why the party was so successful. I think you all know the story. Prabhupada was trying to get him to come back to India, and he wanted to keep preaching in America, and Prabhupada said, "Show me some results." And then Tamal Krishna Goswami had the results waiting already. He was thinking ahead like this. So he opened the door, and they all filed in, each one with a rose in hand, freshly shaved up, and they placed it in front of Prabhupada and paid full dandavats. And Prabhupada was blissful. Prabhupada said, "This is results." He was so intense that one time he had to book a ticket. He had to go to Miami to give the Sunday Feast lecture from New York. You know this one? It may be in his book. I may get the details wrong. I don't recall. But he actually booked 2 return tickets because he was determined that he was going to make somebody a devotee and bring him back. And he did. Because Krishna, when you approach Krishna like that, Krishna has to move in and fulfill, he has to do it. And he did. Time and time again I saw him do this. Everybody from Tennessee, these people, they don't know anything about Krishna consciousness, but he was able to somehow or other reach them. And not only that, but enlighten them and inspire them. And they gave their lives. And they're still devotees, still chanting to this day. Chinese people, American people, anywhere in the world he can go and do this. He just, really incredible, really incredible. China was 1/3 of the world's population at that time. And Prabhupada saw that he's the only one who can do this. And he did it. We all see the Chinese thing is still going on. He had representatives who were transparent as well as people like Giridhari Swami. Ever heard of him? Nobody has, because he's so humble and so low-key. One time in Dallas I saw this, that Tamal Krishna Goswami, being Tamal Krishna Goswami, he wants a particular chair, office chair. And being Tamal Krishna Goswami, it has to be just the right way. It has to be very meticulous, demanding also. So Giridhari Swami, I don't think he had taken sannyas at this time. He was a brahmachari still. He spent his whole day running around Dallas. This was before internet and everything, before Amazon. Just, looking at one office chair out. His whole head was absorbed in office chairs. And he hadn't even taken prasadam that day. All day he went without prasadam, just selflessly serving Tamal Krishna Goswami. But Tamal Krishna Goswami was, such a coconut, if you will, that, he wasn't blind to that. And when he came back, he told me, he said, look at this man. All day he's going without even eating for me. He said this. He appreciated it. He gave him credit like this. So, and that devotee is still going on. Now he's Giridhari Swami. But, he's very, very unsung hero, very low-key person, but really, really important person for Tamal Krishna Maharaj, because Tamal Krishna Goswami was working through people like this, people who were willing to be as transparent as he was. Yeah, there was one man, he was a lawyer actually, and he was a hardcore Shaiva, very serious Shaiva, actually reading Shiva Purana every day, that kind of Shaiva. So he was worshipping very happily. He was a lawyer by profession. So one day his friend, his friend called him into why don't you come with me? I'm going to the Hare Krishna temple. You can join me. And so he said, no, I can't do that. You have to understand that there's a court case I'm involved in with these people, so it's better I don't go. The court case was that whenever ISKCON sets up anywhere, we set up loudspeakers. And, in India it's great, but in other countries they don't like it so much. So this was the situation. So he was representing the plaintiffs. And so he decided, no, I don't think it's good if I go there. But his friend, no, they're not like that. Believe me, it's okay, it'll be fine. Just come. So they went with him to the temple. The friend wasn't thinking anything. The friend was just thinking it's a nice temple. We go take prasadam, we come back. But what happened was that Tamal Krishna Goswami happened to be the speaker there. He just happened to be in Lotoka at that time, wherever it was. So this man sat down, he listens to the lecture, and he's really impressed that this person that his delivery is really solid. A lawyer, he's looking for flaws. And, this person is very, methodical, and he's very logical, he's very, the things he's saying are compelling, and there's morality behind it, and, he looks to be a good, he was really impressed. And he told his friend so. And they went home and he forgot about it. I don't know what happened with the court case, but after some time, his friend called him again. Hey, let's go back to the temple. He said, oh yeah, okay, why not? So he went back again. Just by chance, if there is such a thing as chance, it was again Tamal Krishna Goswami sitting on the Vyasasan when they walked in. Again he listens, and this time even more than his first impression, he was really struck by what you have to understand. At this time he's still doing his Shaiva thing, he's still reading Shiva Purana. He was on a passage in the Shiva Purana that said you have to find a spiritual master. You have to find a bona fide spiritual master, and that person may, you have to do this. So he was conscious of this, and he's listening to the lecture, and he was really impressed this time. And this time, the devotees saw him for a second time, and they invited him. Why don't you come and meet with our spiritual master? And he was like hesitant that I don't know if I wanted to. But he did it, and they had dinner, prasadam. And they're one-on-one. You know what happens when... So, he really went away just really rethinking everything in his life. And the next morning when he did his puja and read Shiva Purana, the court case was still going on, mind you. So he read the Shiva Purana, said, continuing on the same vein, that you have to find a bona fide guru, even if that person appears at first to be your enemy, still you have to accept him. And his mind at this point was like, wow, this is not, this is not coincidence. There's something here. So, gradually he started to attend the temple a little bit sometimes, and he began to chant a little bit, and he eventually became a devotee. Now he's a GBC in North America, temple president in Dallas, Texas. You know him. So, this is Tamal Krishna Goswami. Really, that's a good story. Yeah, it's pretty amazing. And there's so many like this. Virtually everyone that he interacted with, it was it's galvanizing. As Prabhupada says with, what does he say? Red hot iron. Red hot iron. He was like that.
Jayanilo Premakano Aruna Pracho Eino Prabhu Kota Gela